To one, Radio Ulster, Radio Foyle and BBC Sounds. Alessandro Negrini is an Italian filmmaker. He's born in Turin, but he's been based in Derry for a good number of years now. You might remember he made a beautiful film about the Fountain Estate in Derry a few years ago. It was called Paradiso. I think it's still on the BBC iPlayer. But there's a film of Alessandro's being shown at the QFT in Belfast next week as part of the Ducks Ireland Festival, and it tells the story of a disaster that happened at a huge dam in the Italian Alps in October 1963. Part of the mountain collapsed into a reservoir, and the resulting tsunami killed 2,000 people. Now, I have to admit, I'd never heard this story before, the Vajont disaster. The film is called The Moon Beneath the Water, La Luna sott'acqua, and it's based in one of the villages affected, this tiny mountain village of Erto in Italy. Alessandro was in Italy sipping a wee coffee when I caught up with him.
Sometimes I miss the Irish weather.
Do you really, though? Do you?
Well, I'm a good liar.
Because are you still in Derry? Are you still back and forward to Derry?
Yes, I'll be back in Derry next week.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this sort of double life, which brings you to a stranger territory because you never really know where your home is.
That's it. That's true.
I've been living in Ireland for a while, and probably since the Spanish Armada.
But you're about 10 years in Ireland, aren't you?
Yeah, well, more than 10 years, yes. And when I'm in Italy, I definitely miss Derry, Belfast, for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Then after a while, when I'm there, I miss things from
you miss the sunshine and the heat and the coffee and the
of people who emigrated, I guess.
Yeah. Tell me first of all, Alessandro, when did you first come across this story?
It took me a long time to finish this film. At that time, I had just finished a documentary for BBC called Paradiso, produced by Margot Harkin. And I was looking for a story, and suddenly somebody told me, well, you really have to go to this place called Erto because it's a living legend. Because not only it survived the biggest man-made disaster in time of peace, but it was meant to disappear forever, even after the disaster. But they're still there, living there. And so I went there, and I was really fascinated, and then I said, yes, I want to tell this story from a different angle. And here I am. So
had you heard of the story about the Vajont disaster, when you were growing up in Italy?
It's quite an important thing that happened in Italy, but it's rarely told. And sometimes it's told with sort of historic mistakes, because many people still believe that the dam collapsed. But the dam is still there, intact. It was a masterpiece. At that time, it was the tallest dam in the world. So when the mountain collapsed, the waves went through over this village called Erto, and then it banged on the coast of the mountain and went to another village. So there were nearly 2,000 people who died. And it was, a man-made disaster because that dam wasn't supposed to be there. Sometimes, in the name of profit, we do horrible things.
So it was really a chunk came off, a chunk broke off the mountain, and then when it went into the water, it created this sort of tsunami.
Yeah, because it's a very bizarre story because at that time there was a nationalization of the electric power. So the company that owned the dam wanted to sell the dam to this national agency, but the only way to sell it was to do a kind of test. And to do that test, they had to raise the water to the maximum level. But they knew that if they did that, the mountain would have collapsed. But they played poker on people's lives, believing that maybe the mountain would have collapsed slowly. But it didn't. It just went down in a fraction of a second. That created a massive tsunami wave. It's an incredible story. Unfortunately, it's not too well known abroad, and not too well known in Italy either, because all the the responsibilities were enormous, from government and so on. I stayed there for a long time because the only way to do the film is to gain somehow their trust. So maybe it's not even a film on aircraft. Maybe it's a film with aircraft. And maybe it's my way of doing documentary. It was the same thing with Paradiso. I spent lots of time in this place in Derry called The Fountain. And when you are walking on a scar, you cannot portray their lives without their trust. And that was my main goal, so to say.
And the film is beautiful.
Thank you.
There's no voiceover, so it's just the people of Erto, the people who were there, remembering this story, retelling their memories of it. And I mean, it's the most beautiful part of Italy. I mean, the cinematography is amazing. Can I say that my favourite character in the whole film was a man called Filippine Giuseppe?
Oh, yes.
He says, my name is Filippine Giuseppe in Italian, but I'm known as Peppino Jambon, is that right? In the Friulian dialect. What a character.
It looks like he escaped from Fellini's hands. It's an incredible character. Well, unfortunately, he was. Because when you spend time with a community, it happens that some of the characters passed away. So I was really attached to them. I spent lots of time with them, drinking with them, listening to them. And Peppino Jambon was incredible. He was there when the mountain collapsed. And in the film, he was 80. And he was in great shape.
And he said he knew it was going to collapse.
He knew it was going to happen, yes, because the mountain trembled for a long time. So everybody knew. But they didn't evacuate the area because they had to sell the dam. In order to sell the dam, they couldn't create any bad publicity. And they run the risk. Sometimes power do that. They run the risk. Doesn't matter if the risk is on people's shoulders, on people's lives. And it was a major, major thing. It was in 1963.
9th of October 1963.
Yes. But each of them carry, and it's incredible, when you survive to such a disaster, or to a war, or to a sort of internal psychological landslide, and then you're able to face everything, and they're full of hope, something you wouldn't expect. When you spend your life, when your life has been stolen, and then they're still full of hope. I love them for this.
And people,
it's very important in this disenchanted world to carry a sense of hope.
That's the thing. People might say, Alessandro, why would people from here want to see a film about a community away up in the Italian Alps? But it's the story of a community that was scarred by something that happened, a tragedy that happened 50, 60 years ago, and they feel that they have been left behind and forgotten about. And that's kind of a universal thing, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. It is a universal thing. My hope, every time I do a film about a community or a story, is that story will somehow translate in some other people's lives anywhere in the world. Because anywhere in the world there are communities that had to face injustice. But in order to portray that the feeling that you have when you are there, it's so important to have their trust. And I was really lucky because I had a production company, Incipit Film, that really allowed me to stay there lots of time before even filming, just listening, discovering characters. And I was on my own in this ghost town for a while. And they were seeing me suspiciously at the beginning. And they were right, because they've been betrayed so many times by the media, by politics. But then, after a while, I got on well with them, to the point that I was able to film the mayor in his pants, as I saw at the beginning.
How is the community in Erto today then, Alessandro?
They're still there, and one of the most beautiful things was the screening that we did with them. But one thing is to do a film about the Indios in Amazonia and showing the film in Cannes. Another thing is to make a film about the Indios and showing it in Amazonia.
Yeah.
So when I showed the film to them, I was a little bit nervous. But it was an amazing emotional moment because one of them stood up in the audience. And that is going to be my Oscar forever. He said this, Alessandro, we love your film because in your film there is not only death, there is not only a scar, there is a little bit of life. And that for me is going to be my statuette, my Oscar forever. Because they really understood what I saw in them, what I perceived. The fact that even though they were being betrayed forever, they are still, their lives are still, they contain this sense of hope. They don't surrender. It's a little, small, invisible, but powerful story of resistance. And I love these people for this, because their story has been important for them, but also for us. Because it reminds us that sometimes it's really important to remember that we have the right to live in dignity. And dignity is also the place where you live. To have the right to choose where your identity is.
I have to say, I love the title as well, La Luna sott'acqua, the moon under the water.
Yes, that is also connected to the story, because when they built the dam, the air in the canyon stopped. So it created this mist, this constantly covering this village. And one night, when I was spending lots of time there, an old man was looking for the moon and he couldn't see it. And he said to me, you know what, they even stole the moon from us. And that sentence to me, I immediately said, this is going to be the title. They stole the moon from us, but we're going to get it back, even metaphorically. And they did, because they're still there. Even if they're living in abandoned houses, in a sort of ghost town, they are there where they wanted to be and where their identity is. So I love them because they got back the moon in their own way.
Love that. Alessandro Negrini, filmmaker extraordinaire, and that story of a community, I suppose, that felt that the world and the Italian government had kind of forgotten about them and left them behind. The film is called La Luna sott'acqua, the moon under the water, the moon beneath the water, and you can see it on the 12th of June, that's a Wednesday, at 3 o'clock in the QFT in Belfast. It's part of the Docks Ireland Film Festival, and thanks to Alessandro for that.